Talking about next step.
At this time, the time is.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Jackson? Ms. Morreal? Dr. Coleman?
Here.
Ms. Lane? Ms. Tisworth? Microphone.
Turn it on. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you. All right. At this time, may I get a motion to approve the agenda? Chair, also move. It's been moved by Ms. Morreal to approve the agenda for this evening. Can I get a second? Second. It's been seconded by Ms. Jackson. Thank you. Any questions? No discussion, all right. At this time, we're going to, I'm sorry. Oh, all in favor for approving? Aye. Any opposed? No, of course not. If you don't approve, we'll be sitting here all night. At this time, we want to discuss our demographic study and the next steps. Am I calling on Dr. Patton?
So good evening, Board Education members. As you know, last year, the board approved a demographic study under the previous superintendent. This year, we started work on the demographic study and we presented couple board meetings ago, we had a special board meeting to present the results of it. Tonight, we are presenting the next step. So there are several scenarios that we have created, and it's really up to the board on the decision that is made. I'll make a recommendation. I'm not asking for approval tonight because I really do, we have to follow the policy, which is talking to the community and all of that. And so we will make sure that we do that. But Mr. Scheid is going to present information from the results of the demographic study, and then we will talk afterwards. Thank you, Mr. Scheid.
Good evening, Board of Education. Good evening.
No, it's not on. I thought you just, it's on? Okay.
There we go. Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Patton, colleagues and community. Tonight I'm presenting information on demographic study next steps.
Can you?
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so our goals and objectives of this evening is to summarize conclusions that were reached from the demographic study, to review our current elementary school attendance zones, look at criteria used for elementary school closure, review some scenarios for elementary school closure, and then to have a discussion and questions. All right, so as we get into the conclusions from the demographic study, obviously there was a lot of material. It was a very lengthy, comprehensive look, but I really tried to drill down to the raw facts here of where we are and where we're going in the next 10 years. So the results of the study show that we're ultimately going to continue to decrease in our student population over the next decade, making it down to approximately 4,500 students. So, and as shown and discussed in that demographic study, that was kind of the trend at all of our schools where we saw them on that slow, gradual decline that was spanning the past, the present, and into the future. So I've provided student populations here at each of the schools as of, this will be the September data. And then these are our capacity utilization. So that's the percentage of the capacity that we have. So as you can see from the data, we are underutilizing a lot of our school spaces. Now, of course, we don't want to be packed full everywhere, but you know, the reality is we are definitely underutilizing some of our spaces. So those two factors combined kind of leads us to the conclusion that we do have an opportunity to consider consolidating from 9 elementary school sites down to 8. So if we'll take a look at the elementary school attendance zones. So many of these obviously follow neighborhoods and communities. There's kind of one exception to that tends to be a little bit unique. And I'll talk about that in some of the upcoming points. And then just for your reference, I did include the middle school attendance boundaries too. So that kind of shows you how things are then distributed to the middle school. So some of the observations made when looking at the elementary school attendance zones would be that, most of our attendance areas are considered neighborhood or community type schools, with the exception of Danforth and Gibson. Danforth, as you saw on the map, tends to extend from the very east side of town, not quite to the western border, but very far to the west. And then, of course, along the southern edge of the district. And then Gibson does expand quite a distance as well. Obviously, many of these existing boundaries do take into consideration major streets or roadways, because obviously that impacts our ability to get kids safely to school. And then it obviously can present some transportation related issues, if for those that are walking. So most of our attendance boundaries are following that concept, with the exception of Danforth, Gibson, Meadows, and Moline. Just with Danforth, it's really due to so many different streets and roadways that, from the east side of the district to the west side of the district, we have so many north-south routes, east-west routes. So it's very chopped up in terms of having a clear path to get to the school safely with all those roadways. And obviously Gibson intersects with a lot of different roadways as well. Because what you don't realize is, like, Gibson goes almost all the way over to the high school. So it actually, goes well past Bellefountain Road, to the east, but then, obviously comes over to 367 and south into this area, so it's pretty expansive. As you can see from the map, most of the attendance areas are geographically equal in size, with the exception of Lewis and Clark, Highland, Gibson, and Danforth. Lewis and Clark is a very small attendance area on the map compared to all of its neighbors, as is Highland. And then obviously Gibson is larger and Danforth is larger in terms of the geographic area. Again, the Danforth attendance area is the most unique in the fact that it spans from the eastern side of the district, from the city of Riverview all the way over almost to Westview Middle. So let's talk about the criteria for choosing a school foreclosure. So we looked through several lenses when we were looking at this issue. Obviously, minimizing the impact on the scholars is a very important consideration. So you could use this as a guiding principle. So closing the school with the smallest population of students would thus minimize the impact on scholars. You could look at it through the lens of reassignment of scholars to an adjacent school or schools. So you intentionally will assign scholars to an adjacent school or schools, again, to minimize the need for bus transportation and or the commute time. We always want to maintain a sense of community in all of our schools. That's what binds us together and makes us function well. And then we, of course, looked at building conditions and maintenance costs. So which school has the most challenges related to physical condition, layout, and ADA compliance, functionality, and capacity? So ultimately, you can also close or repurpose older, costlier facilities that would require significant investment to maintain. So we're going to go ahead and get into the scenarios. So the scenario A, and again, these were just scenarios that we explored. Scenario A is really centered on minimizing the impact on students. So this is proposing the closure of Lewis and Clark Elementary.
And board members, let me jump in here. So the two things we looked at is the school with the smallest enrollment, and then the building that is that needs the most repair. Let me put it that way. The building that needs the most repair. and then the smallest enrollments. Those were the two areas we looked at. Go ahead.
So yes, this scenario is focused on minimizing the impact on the students. So this would be closing Lewis and Clark Elementary and merge it into one single adjacent school. So that would ultimately impact the least number of students because it's going to impact those that are coming out of Lewis and Clark and the school that's receiving them. This would still maintain a sense of community because you are moving that whole student population in as a whole. This would obviously result in reducing operating costs with the closure of a school. So those are the pros. Now there's obviously cons as well. Transportation will likely be needed because the adjacent school is going to be on the other side of a major roadway. So bus transportation would need to be incorporated into this, which we would incur a cost. The receiving school will have a disproportionately higher student population compared to the other remaining elementary schools. So if we're taking 140 students out of Lewis and Clark and dropping them into an adjacent school, suddenly that is going to be a school that is closer to its capacity compared to all others that would essentially remain the same. And then just another con is the fact that Lewis and Clark is actually in better physical condition and more functional than other buildings. So if we move on to scenario B, again, we are operating under the premise of minimizing the impact on students. That's why we've selected Lewis and Clark in this scenario. So the difference would be assigning the student population to several adjacent schools. So instead of one school receiving all 140 students, we could break that up two or so ways if that would be the desire. The pros of that would be that it would obviously not max out any one particular school. It would be a little bit more even distribution among several schools. So it wouldn't max out one particular facility compared to the others. We would still maintain a sense of school community because you're still doing it an adjacent school. So it's in the same geographic area. It's not like we're proposing moving them to the other side of town. So they would be in the same geographic area. We, of course, would still reduce the operating costs with the closure of the school. And in this case, we would also increase the probability of the student being in front of a certified teacher. As you're aware, while we've made great gains in our staffing, we still have a ways to go with getting certified staff in front of our students. So with many of these scenarios, it would allow us to get certified staff in front of our students. Shifting the cons, again, transportation would be necessary since the adjacent schools are still on the other side of other roadways. We would be impacting more students because it's not just those that are coming out of Lewis and Clark. It would be every school that they're going into. You know, anytime you change identity, so we would be impacting, 2 or 3 schools potentially in this scenario. So that does have an impact on the broader student population in those schools. And then, of course, the fact that Lewis and Clark still in better physical condition than other schools. So now we're going to go ahead and shift it to scenario C. So this is going into the physical condition of the building. So we are going to get to the pros and cons, but this first page is really to kind of highlight the school that was selected and the challenges that it faces. So this scenario is the closure of Danforth Elementary. So Danforth is unique amongst all the buildings in this district because it's actually one that was not built by the school district. It was built by the Archdiocese of St. Louis. So it was built as a Catholic parish, Our Lady of Good Counsel. And it was used that way for many, many years prior to the school district acquiring it. So it was designed and built to be a parish school, which has a little bit unique design to it because while they typically serve a smaller population of students, however, their common area spaces are usually a little on the larger side. So if you ever looked at Danforth Elementary, you'll notice that it has a very large gymnasium, the whole lower level where the cafeteria and the kitchen, happens to be very large because those were actually built and designed to serve the broader needs of the whole parish, not just the students that go to school there Monday through Friday. So when a church or religious organization has a school, it has a slightly different feel to it than what your typical public school does. And obviously we have a limited number of classrooms there and the spaces are a little bit on the smaller side. So it has a little bit different feel than most of our other buildings. It also has a lower student capacity, again, compared to our other buildings. So, you know, we can only accommodate about 325 students in Danforth, while our other ones can be up in the 500s, 600s. So it's ultimately has a smaller physical capacity, you know, unless you start making major modifications or adding on to the building in some way. The big concern is it has a lot of ADA accessibility issues. So we actually have 5 different levels in that building. And it would require the installation of an elevator along with a wheelchair lift, along with a switchback ramp just to make the building accessible. So the price tag associated with that comes in about $1.6 million. So currently how we've been operating is if we have somebody that is in the Danforth attendance area that has accessibility issues, we have to reassign them to another school in the district and make arrangements for them to be transported to the other school. So aside from the ADA accessibility issues, we do also have some challenges as it relates to the building itself. And you could talk to some that were around here back when we acquired it. It was actually in a lot worse shape than it is now, but it's definitely not on the same, has not been on the same level as our other buildings. And we know our other buildings have some opportunities, so I'm not trying to gloss over that, but Danforth is definitely a little bit further behind than the rest. And it's not uncommon when the Archdiocese is looking at consolidating and closing, they do pull back a little bit as it relates to long-term maintenance. So, you know, and that was the case here as well. So there are a lot of issues with the building that were kind of deferred, to say the least. So we have tuck pointing issues. We actually, if you go in front of the building now, you can see if you're looking at the gymnasium from the street, you can see that the concrete columns are spalling and starting to pop apart. We have sidewalks that need to be replaced. We have, you know, all sorts of things going on in the exterior. We have deteriorating retaining walls and so forth. So that adds about another $250,000 just into bringing those things up to par. A unique thing that they did is they glued all the carpet down in the classrooms and they glued it to the asbestos floor tile. So that carpet is actually very old. And as you know, just in your personal life, you can clean a carpet, but you can only clean it so much. And if it's worn out and played out, then it has to go. The problem with that is in order to rip out our carpet, we have to go through a full asbestos abatement process. So we've done some of that in the building, but we still have approximately 9 classroom spaces that still have the carpet in. And that's been a challenge with us and with our staff because, you know, old carpet, and especially those that have respiratory sensitivities and so forth, have some challenges with that, and that has presented itself. So obviously, remedying that issue would be in the neighborhood of $170,000. And then we do have our original 1950s windows in place and the glass block walls, which obviously are not very well insulated. So while we are heating and cooling that space, a lot of it is literally seeping out of the windows. So replacing that and addressing those issues would be in the neighborhood of 1.5 million. So let's go ahead and shift gears into this scenario, but again, looking at the pros and cons. So the pros of this approach would be to realign the elementary attendance zones district-wide to equalize the student population in alignment with the building capacities. We would see some cost avoidance of approximately $3.5 million of addressing all these physical deficiencies of Danforth. Hopefully you're reutilizing those funds to improve other schools district-wide. We'd have a reduced cost related to providing students with physical limitations, the special bus transportation to the other schools that we currently do have to pursue. And overall, we would reduce operating costs with the closure of the school, and we would have a more balanced middle school enrollment within our district as well. And that's another reason why I showed you that middle school map, because things are a little bit out of balance that way as well. Cons related to this scenario would be that it would obviously require reassignment of students to numerous schools. So depending how we redraw those boundaries, it could touch every school. Then there would be a district-wide impact on students, with all schools being affected by that zone change. And then we would have to ultimately make adjustments to our transportation to then accommodate the changes of those attendance zones. So I'm going to go with the last scenario, which is scenario D, which is to do nothing. So it could be the will of the board to not pursue any of these scenarios whatsoever and simply just consider this information for possible action at a later date, you know, or no action. It's ultimately open on that front. So the pros of that would be boundaries would remain as they are. Nobody's going to be impacted. We'd still have our sense of school community that we have. We wouldn't be increasing any transportation cost. Obviously, the cons related to this is that our building capacities are going to remain low. There won't be any disruption to our schools. We're not going to really be saving the money, you know, in that scenario though too. So, because we would not be closing a school. We're going to continue to send the students with ADA requirements to school and pay for transportation. And then we would continue to address our issues at Danforth and any other schools the best that we could. So that's the end of our scenarios. So we do have some recommendations. Again, these are not action items for tonight. These are just something to consider as this discussion goes forward.
So Carl, let me step in here for the
Yes.
recommendation. So with all of what he's presented and what we know from the demographic study, there are recommendations being made to take action to close one of our schools. Possibly reorganize. This is a great opportunity for us to have primary and intermediate schools. Primary would be K-2 schools, intermediate would be 3-5 schools. That really allows us to focus on the foundational skills of our students. So our kindergarten through second grade principals and teachers would be laser focused on developing reading skills, developing number sense. They would be primarily focused on getting our students ready. I always give the analogy of a home that's being built. You build a home, you start with the foundation of it. You start with the basement of it. And if you build a strong foundation, that home will stand for a long time. But if your foundation is weak, you're going to start having leaks. You're going to start having crumbling sidewalks and crumbling driveways. So this gives us an opportunity for the foundational piece of our students to really make a difference for them as we send them to the intermediate buildings, which would be the 3-5 buildings. So, you know, reorganizing in that way, this would not take place next year. We would build a 2 or 3 year plan so that we would get our community input. We would send out surveys to our community. We would have meetings. We would actually make sure that their voice is being heard. We would also make sure we're tying in our two policies that are tied to that, which is FB, facilities planning, and then FC, school closure, consolidation, and reorganization. And then also the school that, whichever school that's decided to be closed, I would love to partner with a university, and HBCU, possibly Harris Stowe, or any one of our other universities to bring a satellite college into our community. That shows that we are investing in our community. We can help our parents maybe with the high school equivalency exams and tests. We can also send some of our high school kids there to start taking college classes as juniors and seniors. So it would be really an investment in our community. So that is the recommendation that I'm making to the board. Again, I'm not asking for a decision tonight. I really believe that this is not to be decided on in a moment's notice. It's really to answer questions, go back for more information if you all feel that we need to gather more information. And also get our community involved, make them part of the process, hear their voices. And so that is my recommendation to the board. Are there any questions? Can you turn on your mics? Thank you, Ms.
I hear what you're saying about the possible consolidation or using it as a satellite location. But I'm thinking with all the repairs or whatever that you say that Danforth needs, if we couldn't get that option, what would be another option if we decided to say that Danforth should be closed? Would you tear the building down?
I mean, so while the building has many challenges, I would say one redeeming quality of that is the site. It is a very large site.
Okay.
If you look at the property, we have quite a bit of property there because we
Mhm.
have the athletic fields, we have that parking area behind the
Mhm.
building, which is pretty expansive as well.
All
So
right.
that site has a value in the future as well. So
Mhm.
even if we cease using it as an elementary school now, it could be a future site of something else. So
Okay.
it is a good piece of property, whether it be a new early childhood center or a new elementary school, whatever that need may be
Right.
in the future. I think that consideration would need to be given to that site to
Okay.
be
And Ms.
redeveloped.
Morreale, as we partner with a college or university, they can go in and reorganize
Reorganize and do-
right,
okay.
and that's a way for us to bring in funding as far as I'm
Right,
concerned,
okay.
because they're renting the space.
Right, okay.
So we give them the option of, if they want to reorganize, if they want to renovate, they can. But as Carl shared with me, when you think about the property that it's on, when you think about the sanctuary that sits on there, I would love to see that in the future as Riverview's Performing Arts Center. It's a beautiful sanctuary, so that's something we can turn that into as well. So there could be many things we can do with it, but I agree with him, it's very valuable property, and I definitely wouldn't suggest that we sell it.
You know what? I'm hearing Danforth, but I was thinking another school, another
Oh.
building.
Mhm.
So now when you said the parish school next to it, that's the one that's right across from early childhood.
Yes.
Correct.
That's not what I was thinking. Okay.
President?
Yes.
So I have two things I'd like to clarify.
Okay.
Based on the presentation that we paid for the demographic study, according to those professionals, we're losing population, or they are predicting that in 8 to 10 years, our population is going to decrease. So that's less children, period. I'm not sure how we address that as a school district, because those are municipal and community issues to see what we can do to increase the population with children back into our area. So that's outside of our influence.
Can I speak to that for just a second, Ms. Lee?
Absolutely.
Well, usually it's the school district that drives population. It is the school district that drives population usually. So if we can get back to full accreditation and we can make our schools effective, that's what the reorganization is about for the K-2, 3, 5. People will want to come to this area. So the school district has some input in it, not as much as the municipalities. But if we can do what I think we can do with the school district, it will draw people to the school district. That
Okay.
would be our goal.
Okay, all right. Okay, I understand that. So did I also understand you to say you're considering Lewis and Clark?
Yes, that was scenario A and B. which was being approached in terms of minimizing the impact on our students. So if we wanted to go the most basic and simple way of closing a school, that is obviously the smallest student population, therefore that would have the least amount of impact.
So are
on the
we thinking
district.
about closing both of them or one of them?
Just,
Okay.
it'll be one or the other.
This
yes.
one or the other?
Yes.
Okay.
Keep in mind that Lewis and Clark is in the better condition than most of our schools. And if you close Lewis and Clark, you still have the problem of the disrepair in the other
At
schools.
Danforth. Okay.
And
Okay.
I had the opportunity to visit the Ferguson Florissant School District this week and last week. And one of the things I got a chance to see was that pre-K through second grade plan and that intermediate plan of 3 through 5. And I was thoroughly impressed. The focus of having the pre-K through second grade, those students in that building being just for those students or those buildings, because it's more than one, being just for those students, and the focus that they had on literacy and math and building that foundation for learning. It was amazing, the nurturing climate, and it's just the focus on academics to lay that groundwork for the foundation of education. And I have grandchildren in all 3 of those levels. I have a grandchild in the intermediate and a grandchild in the pre-K, and then I have one at the middle school. Because at first when I heard about them in that redistricting, I was like, I was kind of mad at them because I like my kids' school. But I'm telling you, it is absolutely an amazing focus, especially when you take those younger children out of the building with the bigger kids and the distractions and all that comes with older children being around younger children. It's an absolutely amazing learning environment. If you have a chance to visit, you should, because it is amazing.
So as a former principal of a K-2 building for 12 years, I could not agree more. We were laser focused on what we had to do in order to prepare those babies to go to the next grade level. We were on phonics, we were on building their phonemic awareness, their number sense, also on the social emotional piece, because that is a very important piece too, building them in that way. We didn't have a whole lot of bullying happening because and I'm not saying that the older kids are the ones that bullying, but typically when you have older children in buildings with younger children, so it really helped on everything. We were very effective in preparing them to take the state assessment in 3rd grade. So it really does allow focus to be there. And then as they stepped into the 3rd through 5th grade building, it was focusing on higher level thinking skills and reading comprehension. So it allows our building leaders and our teachers to focus on what is needed at that level. The job of the primary building was to prepare them for the intermediate. The job of the intermediate was to get them ready for middle. The job of the middle is to get them ready for high school. And the job of the high school is to get them ready for life. And so it really allowed us to be laser focused on what we needed to do at each level. So I do want to throw that in. I saw Ms. Williams has had her hand up. I'm not sure when her hand went up, but I just want to, I want board president to let you know that Ms. Williams has her hand up.
Ms. Williams, you have a comment?
I do. I have a question and a comment. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I've been involved in a similar process in 2 other school districts that needed to make decisions about school closures. And so I am wanting to hear more about what administration is recommending for the process to make the decision. Or is the board being asked to accept a recommendation without having a process for community engagement?
Oh, no. So Ms. Williams, we started that at the beginning, I think at the questioning piece. So no, what I want to know is, as I said, do you all require more information? Part of our policy says that we have to get community input. And so I am not asking for us to venture down this road either way without the input of our community. So the answer to your question is no, that's not what I'm asking. But if there are additional information that the board is needing us to collect, we can. But I am making a recommendation that we close one of our buildings to address the enrollment loss that is anticipated, as well as to make our buildings, the usage of our buildings more effective. Does that answer your
Okay,
question?
yes, I heard you at the beginning. I heard you at the beginning of the meeting. I just wanted to be sure that we're going to have community engagement.
Absolutely.
As a board member, I would feel very uncomfortable voting on a position without having, because the recommendation feels like we're being asked to consider something, but I'm unclear about when we would have the community engagement piece.
Okay, well, we will work to make that more clear for you, Ms. Williams, in the policy. And I'm gonna bring it up as we're talking. Can you go back and click on that for me, please? I thought I brought it in with me, but I didn't. Yep, I didn't bring that part in. Ms. Williams, can you go to your next question and we will pull up the policy and I will read the policy. It's also in the attachment. It's in the, I think one of the last slides in the slide deck, the second to the last one. But it talks about school closing, consolidation and reorganization, and including the community in that information or in that process. So we are definitely, or will definitely make sure our community is a part of that.
Okay, thank you. We don't need to go back. I don't want to hold up the meeting. I'm fine. I just wasn't used to seeing a recommendation piece before the other pieces of the process.
Okay, so what I will say is then eventually I will make a recommendation. I'm not making it at this time because I want us to talk about it. I want the community involved in the discussion. But eventually, based on the information that was provided to us from the demographic study, that would be the direction that I would go.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so,
Go ahead.
one of the recommendations close Lewis and Clark, correct?
Correct.
Because of the low student population. But you're now busing kids from Lewis and Clark to other schools,
That would be correct.
and that also lowers the student population. But if you close the scenario, if you close Lewis and Clark, what would you do with that building?
That's where we would have to also reflect, similar to what Superintendent had mentioned with the Danforth property. We could reach out to some other entities in education that could perhaps use that space. We could, look at what our needs are as a district to see other things that we could redistribute into that building to keep using it. So I don't think we, in any scenario, would be just vacating a building entirely. Because again, we are one with the community. We don't want to just close up a building to become an eyesore or a problem for a neighborhood. So again, that's why we would have consideration into doing something else with that building in order to still make sure that it's a viable part of the community.
Now,
And
correct me,
Ms. Sisworth, let me jump in. So if we were to close Lewis and Clark, what we would do is bus those students to other schools, which would increase the enrollment at some of our other schools.
I understand it.
Okay.
When the first meeting with the guy,
Mhm.
when he was talking about the student population within so many years, what did they have to do with closing? Because he's talking about building this, building that, and all that. Now, what they have to do with closing Lewis and Clark and Gibson? I mean, or was it just what?
No, what they were referencing is ultimately that our student population has been declining and will continue to decline. So, so within 10 years, they're projecting that we're going to be at about 4,500 students. We're already underutilizing most of our elementary building spaces as it is. So as we reach that point, we would definitely be well below full utilization and
But-
actually a very low percentage of utilization. So, you know, we have an opportunity to close one of those schools, which we would obviously generate an operational savings if we close a school.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, that part, but you said we're 4,500, right?
We're going to go down to 4,500.
And right now we're, we're lacking, we're at 5.
We're at 5,300 students enrolled, approximately 5,300.
And so we're talking, what, 10 years?
Yeah,
Yes.
by 2035.
And what was he talking about as far as the zoo and all these other things? What they had to do with our schools, closing our schools? I mean, I understand you're saying that about the population and lower the student population, but it's almost like he was trying to sell us something.
So Ms. Tisworth, the way I recall the meeting, they were presenting factual information related to what they're anticipating enrollment to be. The question about the zoo, also the growth that's going to occur at Riverview and 270, those were questions we were asking. We were saying, well, what about the zoo? Wouldn't that bring in more people? And what about the casino and with the things that they're building at Riverview? We were asking the question because we were making sure that they took those things into consideration when they made the prediction that we would lose approximately 800 to 1,000 students in 10 years. And they said that they did take that into consideration. And the demographic organization, the organization that did the demographic study, they weren't leading us one way or the other. They were just saying, here is where you will be in 10 years. And it's up to us to act on it or not.
Ms. Lane, you had a question?
I think just like this is, again, one of the recommendations. We're just talking
Yeah,
here.
Absolutely,
We're
this is
all we're
discussion.
doing-
Yeah.
It's just a discussion.
It is.
And so I appreciate the effort that you all put into giving us things to think about.
Mhm,
And I appreciate some of the community members who are here
mhm.
to hear what we're thinking about. So where it says possible reorganize the K-2, where would those facilities be? What would we do?
So we would look at what schools, so if we would look at the 8 schools the 8 elementary buildings that would remain open if the board decided to close one of our elementary buildings. And the schools that are closest to each other will become sister schools, because we've got to make sure that they're not traveling across our district to get to their intermediate building. So the best way to do that is to make schools that are close to each other sister schools. In my previous school district, we had K-2, 3-5 buildings. 2 of our K-2 schools fed into one 3-5 building. 2 other ones fed into another 3-5 building, and it was really determined by proximity. And so we want to make sure, for example, let's say Highland. So let's say we made Highland a K-2 school. Well, we wouldn't make LeMasters the 3-5 school for Highland because they would have to travel across the district. So proximity would make the difference. And as I said, this will be a 2 to 3 year plan. We will build it together with the community involved, my team involved, the board involved, and we would make sure that it's effective and that it really addresses the needs of our district. So, but in answer to your question, proximity would determine which schools would be K-2 and which schools would be 3-5.
So the students are gonna, if we adopt this recommendation or any other that may come about, the children are going to have to be they're going to be mobile one way or the other.
Yeah, so yes, I guess, yeah, they would be mobile. We would transport them from, in the way that we've done it in the past in my previous school district, the K-2, 3-5 students rode the same bus. We stopped at it was let's say we had 6 buses.
Okay.
3 of the buses stopped at the K-2 school first and dropped off. The other 3 stopped at the 3-5 school and dropped off, and then they exchanged. So then they brought, so it was an exchange. So we would make sure that the students are picked up and dropped off at the same time. So we were not adding another layer necessarily or time. The K 2, 3, 5 school would start at the same time and end at the same time.
Okay.
And I brought the map back up just so you could, again, see how things are currently arranged. So, so if we're talking schools that are adjacent to each other, so some of those sister schools could be like Highland and Glasgow or Coke and Lemasters, and again, those are just examples.
Ms. Jackson.
Hello, I have a question. Are you all district, I know you're aware because I know you are transporting the kids from Castle Point to other school, to another elementary school. How many kids are being removed from Castle Point that are attending Meadows? They live 4 blocks from the school. They can walk to the school, but they're being bussed out of Castle Point and going to another school. How many children do we have doing that?
So, Ms. Jackson, I'm not aware of any students who, the way that I think that the area is divided is that it gets to a certain point and it becomes Meadows Elementary School, and one half we become Lemasters. I'm not aware of any student that should be at Lewis and Clark that's being bused to Meadows. I'm not saying there isn't, because sometimes our parents put in for an in-district transfer. And so if they put in for an in-district transfer, for example, the babysitter lives in the Meadows area. And so after school, that particular child would go directly to the babysitter's home in the Meadows area. We do approve in-district transfers, but it has to be a request that goes to the Student Support Services office. And there has to be a reason why a parent would make that request. And we do have some in-district transfers. I can find out
Yes,
for
it's
you
quite a
how
bit
many.
kids, and they're right there, you know where Moline Acres Police Department is?
Yeah,
That street right after there.
okay.
Those kids are being bused. Those kids used to go to Lewis and Clark. I know that I've been in the district for 22
Do you know
years.
what street? Do you know what street? I'm sorry.
That's Royal and, can't remember Royal and Princess is the next one, but I'm Royal and Princess. I can't remember. the
Okay,
name.
I'll find out, but I will.
When I go home, I'm gonna text you that
Okay,
street. But I see
please.
them every morning. And on that block right there, they used to walk to Lewis and Clark.
So are you saying, Ms. Jackson, the whole block now
It's a whole
goes
bunch
to?
It's a whole bunch of kids. It's more than a
Okay.
block.
Okay,
Yeah, it's more than a block.
okay. So let me find
So
out.
I think that also had a lot to do with the numbers at Lewis and Clark, because you took a bunch of our kids because of that redistrict they did before, and they moved them,
Oh,
and they're going
got
to
you.
another school outside of, when they can walk. And my biggest thing with that is that we have kids that are getting bused from in that area, Castle Point, to another school when they can
Okay.
walk, 4 or 5 blocks.
So
We
you're
have
saying
kids
it was
walking 9
previously
blocks.
redistrict and
Yes.
okay, I got you. I thought you were
Yes.
saying,
No,
okay,
there was
gotcha.
Right, and you could see that on this map, actually.
Yeah.
If you look at where the word Meadows is, immediately below that is a line that's going this way. That is Chambers Road.
Yeah,
So as you can see, there is a large portion of Castle Point that is actually attending Meadows from the previous redrawing of the boundaries.
that would take numbers away from Lewis
It
and
would.
Clark. A lot of
It
numbers.
I remember when they did that, Ms. Jackson, and that was
Yes.
part of that redistricting
Mhm.
when they built Westview. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it was a whole big thing, and
Yep.
when I go into the housing wins and whys. that
Well, when
the
you look at the,
gerrymandering
yes,
that
when you
took
look at it,
place,
Dr. Coleman, it doesn't make sense the way the
yeah.
district was broken up. When you look at Danforth going all the way over from Riverview to the Lucas and Hunt area. And so, Ms. Jackson, I thought you were saying now where you're saying it
No, I'm
was
talking about, yeah, when they
previously
redid
done.
it
That's a
previously.
good question.
And if those kids were coming back to Lewis and Clark, the numbers of Lewis and Clark would be way higher. Because I see them daily. When I'm driving by, those kids are getting on buses and they're going out the district. And again, I say, when we have kids walking 9 blocks to school, when those kids are 4 blocks from the school, they're getting bused. That's crazy to me.
You know, but that has been a problem in education for years. I remember when I was a child, long time ago. I lived directly across the street from Marquette Elementary. I mean, I could have walked out my door and walked there. And we had to walk to Sticks, which is over behind Barnes Jewish Hospital. We lived across the street from Marquette Elementary, but we school buses then either, but we had to walk because that was the side of the street that we lived on. And so sometimes those lines are just drawn and it doesn't make sense just looking at it. You go, why would you do that? But we don't know, but
Especially when it wasn't like that at first.
yeah.
It
Right.
wasn't. It
And
was
and
not.
it happened,
I mean, in 22
like,
years,
right.
it wasn't like that at
yes,
first.
it happened when they
Mhm.
did the redistricting.
Yep.
Right, and if you look at the area of, I'm just looking at Danforth on the left side of the screen, you know, those are apartments. And so those apartments that are on Lucas and Hunt and Paul's Ferry, they go to Danforth, they go to Central, but Westview is right there. You know, there's another, when you turn on to Nimnich,
Nimnich.
there's an apartment, there's some
The
apartments
Laurel.
on the left-hand side when you go up. You could hit Westview with a rock. Those students go to Central. So that's why if you look at, if you go to the middle school for me. If you look at, like, that's not logical right there. It's not balanced. And so this would, this would give us an opportunity to balance our school district and redraw the boundary lines. If Danforth was the school that would close, we would have to do that
Yeah.
because we would have to send those 230 kids to other schools, but then we'd have to make room in some of the other schools by changing the boundary lines to make better sense. It's not logical that students who can see Westview from their back window go to Central. It's, and that's kind of what you're
Yeah.
referring
yeah.
to, that it would allow us to do that, though.
So my question, the infamous they did
Mhm.
this.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this something that we have the ability to do? Can we change these district lines? Because, I don't know, I'm not familiar with those I don't think. But what you said just doesn't really make sense. So somebody made the decision to do that, the infamous they. So do we have the ability to kind of make some of this stuff make sense? And if we did, would that still have any impact on the fact that we still our population of students is still reducing? I mean, would it?
So reducing us by an elementary building would allow it wouldn't, no, in answer to your question, by
Okay.
closing us, by redrawing the boundaries, it wouldn't necessarily increase our enrollment. It would give us better utilization of our school buildings. We could use them to a fuller capacity, not completely full, but a fuller capacity. The numbers that you see that our capacity are today, and that's with 5,276, I think it's 5,276 in terms of our enrollment. That's today. So if they're anticipating 1,000 student, 800 to 1,000 student drop, and we don't close any of our buildings, then you will see less utilization of the buildings that we have. So so closing the school would allow us to more effectively use our buildings, redraw the boundaries so that they make more sense. But I will be very transparent here. If Danforth is a school that is closed, we will have to redraw the boundaries, which will affect almost every other school in our district. It will affect it in the right way because we are redrawing the boundaries to make better sense. But, for our families, it could be, if their babies were in Danforth, or let me say Glasgow, since kindergarten and they're fourth graders, they don't want their babies moving in fifth grade, right? So we would accommodate that. We would make it so the student didn't have to move. They can complete the fifth grade in the building they were in. That's where the public voice comes in. So if this is the road that we venture down, we want to make this successful, supporting with keeping our students in mind. And so, Ms. Lane, in answer to your question, how do we draw more people to our area? That's a municipality and a school district. The school district draws the people to a specific area, quite honestly.
And I remember, and I'm thinking, and I'm not gonna necessarily say, cause I don't want to accuse anybody, but there was a time in Riverview, and I'm looking at Mr. Thomas because we were instrumental in getting some things changed, where, one particular school in our district was treated, like a parochial school, so to speak. And it had a specific race of student that could attend that school no matter where they lived in the district. And so I believe I can get the smoke from coming out of my ears and without, I'm not trying to get sued. Some of those boundaries that you speak about were when there was more of an ethnic group that lived in specific areas. And so those boundaries came about as a result of that. That's what, yeah. Yeah. That's
So
what-
this
that's what
allows
that
us
came-
to make that correction.
Yeah.
It also, when you think about full accreditation, I'll say this, with, if we were to turn 4 of our buildings into K2 buildings, it takes 4 schools out of the equation for accreditation, because they would only be looking at 3rd and up, right? It allows us to focus that foundational and get them ready. So there is a method, there's a reason that I believe this would be very effective. But it allows us to correct what was done. I wasn't a part of this area. I was from a different Florissant in North County. So when these things were done, I'm not sure why they were done. I can make assumptions, but I won't. What I'd like to do is focus on now what? Now what do we do? And how do we make this more equitable? How do we ensure that we can put our students in a position to be successful? How do we make sure we are laser focused on the foundational piece? Because if we can do that well, Ms. Lane, we draw people to this area. The prices of our home property values increase, right? We've got a zoo over here. we've got a great opportunity here. And so again, this is a discussion. I want our community involved on this discussion as well. This is not a decision that the school district is going to make without the input of our public. Because our public is who we serve. These 5,300 babies are who we serve. I want us to do what's right by them.
So can I ask another question about Michelle Obama?
Mhm.
You know, I know that that's a very vital part of our
Mhm.
district.
Mhm.
And I've heard from time to time, there've been waiting lists and what have you.
Mhm.
Are there any, are we thinking about expanding or adding or something? Or would this be an opportunity for some growth in that area as well?
Yes, ma'am. This could be an opportunity for us to add a pre-K class to each of our elementary buildings. So it could be pre-K through 2. We could do that. I think I think maybe Mr. Scheid mentioned, using Danforth, if we decide we could raise the building and build an expanded early childhood center on that property. So yes, there are many things that we can consider because we do typically have a wait list at Michelle Obama. We could also start adding pre-K classes. The difference would be we would have to make sure that the buildings were fitted for the little people, right? So shorter sinks, shorter drinking fountains, shorter toilets, things like that. So we would have to make sure that they're fitted that way. My understanding is that Riverview used to be that way with the K235. So some of our buildings may already be in the condition in terms of having those smaller things. I know Highland does. I've been in the classroom over there, so I know it does. I'm looking at Mr. Ford like he's still principal over there. He's not. But I do remember walking through that building wondering why the sinks were so little, right? It is because we did have a K2 building in our district at one time. So we would have to make sure that we could do it, it's fitted, but definitely we could, we can consider how do we reduce the wait list at the Michelle Obama Early Childhood Center. And also, that also allows us to get our babies earlier so we can get their academics strong earlier. And that way we can build, you all are going to hear foundation, foundation, foundation from me, because if we don't do the foundation well, all we're going to do is chase kids who are almost making it, as opposed to making sure the majority of them are making it. And so I just think that's very important to the success of any school district.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, when you talk about changing the boundaries as far as the school is concerned, do the board have any involvement in it?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Ms. Tisworth, we can't do anything without our board's approval.
I mean, like we participate in, well,
Yes, we would.
instead of crossing all over everywhere, we can have involvement of Danford and, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah, so it would be our community, it would be our board, it would be people within our district. We would work together to build the plan that makes the most sense and that would be the most effective.
And do we have to wait 3 years to make these improvements?
No, that's just a consideration.
Yeah.
Now, it will take some time to coordinate this kind of
Okay.
transformation, because if you're obviously changing around the grade level configuration, that we obviously have a little bit of homework to do on that front to make sure that we're prepared for it, and the coordinated effort of synchronizing it so it all comes into place, and that our community understands what's coming and how it's coming. So again, we need to definitely allow the time for planning. Yes, you could move on a faster pace, but
Without dates? Do we have to wait 3 years to incorporate K-2 what?
Well, so I would want to build an effective either 2 or 3 year plan, Ms. Tisworth. I think that is the smart thing to do, not to rush it, because when we rush it, we make more mistakes. We're not completely thinking through everything. And so I do believe we should start working on a 2 or 3 year plan as a district, start working on that as a district, and then maybe start implementing it in 2 years. Um, um, But what I think is important is that those students who have been at the same school for so long, if they have one more year at Highland or Glasgow or Lewis and Clark or whatever it is, I think they should be able to finish that out. It's too emotional to pull them away of their friend group that they've been with since kindergarten. And so that's why I believe that we need to do this at a slower pace, build a solid plan, and then start implementing the plan.
And it's not the first time we've done this. The district has. I wasn't here, but there used to be a middle school on Chambers where the bus depot is.
East
And
Middle,
when I
yeah.
moved here, that building was vacant, but it has since now, it's sold and it's now the fire department. So the district has closed a school
Well, we built
before.
Westview to replace that building.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
That
part of
building
that's
had-
part of
that
the
building
stuff
had
I
to-
don't know.
yeah, That building had to be raised.
And that building actually started out as the original high school, and then it
Right.
became East Middle. And then ultimately it was closed down and then replaced with Westview.
Had to be closed.
Yeah,
It
it had a
major
lot of
dispute.
challenges and deficiencies.
Major dispute in
Yes.
management. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, without further ado, thank you, Mr. Chapman, a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
It's been motion by Ms. Real. May I get a second?
Second.
And second by Ms. Lane to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, well, good night and thank you for your time.
Let me feel you.
So I used to be the principal at Anya. So that's the reason she said it, because I was